Actually, I grew up in upstate New York, south of Rochester, in a small college town. Two brothers and a sister and very supportive parents. I had a great childhood. My, my wife always tells people that I grew up in the Richie Cunningham family. It wasn't quite that wholesome, but it was a, it was a good childhood. Unfortunately, that part of the country, the job opportunities aren't real strong. So at 20 years old, I enlisted in the Air Force. I figured it was an opportunity to see the world and take some college classes. That was back in 76, and at that point the recession was on and gas rationing was the call of the day, and they suspended overseas tours for anyone in a first term. So I spent the entire 4 years at McGuire Air Force Base. I guess there are probably two things that I took from Air Force life. One being the sense of fair play, level playing field. When you go into the Air Force or any branch in the military really, there's no longer white, black, yellow, brown. Everybody's, in our case, Air Force blue. Everybody goes in at the same level. Everybody has the same opportunity to achieve. And the second thing that I took was attention to detail and the quality of work that you do. When you go into basic training in the Air Force, it's more mental than physical. There's a lot of inspections almost on a daily basis, and the attention to details, things like they'd take the cap off your toothpaste tube, and if there was toothpaste in the bottom of the cap, you got to demerit. You had to iron and fold your underwear, and everything had to be stacked perfectly, and all the stacks had to be evenly spaced, and nobody could be, one stack couldn't be touching the other, and all your uniforms had to be grouped by shirts and pants and type of uniform, and they all had to be facing the same direction, and all the buttons had to be buttoned, and the extreme attention to detail. And I remember two things that I learned. Number one was you had to operate as a team. If you didn't, there was no way any of you were going to survive. And I guess probably the first week that I was in, I was promoted to squad leader. So I got to know the drill sergeant fairly well. So I got up the nerve at the last week of basic training to ask him, what was it? Why so much attention to detail? And I'll never forget, he said in most career fields, this kind of attention to detail really isn't that important. Here, without it, people die. And it's something that always stuck with me. It's kind of like in this career, it's not that what you do or what you don't do causes people to die, but the quality of work that you perform and the attention to detail can make a profound effect in a good way or a bad way on people's lives for generations, for not only them, but their children and their grandchildren, their church and their favorite charity. And it's a tremendous responsibility, but at the same time, it's an enormous opportunity to help people achieve their goals. Well, when I got out of the Air Force, I worked retail for a few years. I worked for a small chain and basically ran the store soup to nuts, payroll, a lot of ordering. It was as close as I could get to being a business owner without physically putting the money up. And eventually I made the decision to buy a service franchise. It was a no-name service franchise, and took on a partner. And in a very short period of time, about 5 years, we went from nothing, and I mean nothing, and built it to a customer base of over 10,000 customers. We were one of the top 10 franchises in our system, and we built it on quality, superior service, and we were also the highest price. And I found that people were willing to pay for good quality service as long as they got it. Well, when we first started, there really weren't any other franchises in the area. And by the time we started to build up a strong customer base and the word started to get out, other people started buying franchises. And unfortunately, there was a clause in the franchise agreement that allowed the franchisor to sell one franchise per 60,000 population within a county, and everybody worked that county. And their theory was that everybody could share things like yellow page advertising and television advertising. But what actually happened was it created a price war. As a new franchise came in, it was much easier for them to simply undercut everyone else's price by 10 or 15% and take their customers than it was to take the time and expense to create a new customer. As a result, every time a franchise came in, the prices continued to drop, and you had to do twice as many jobs this year as you did last year to make the same amount of profit. The more jobs you did, the quicker you did the jobs, and the poorer the quality was. And after a while, it just got to the point where I couldn't physically stand in front of a customer and say, "Yes, Mrs. Smith, here's the invoice. We did the best quality job that we could, and please write me a check." Knowing that we had rushed the job. We had to rush the job to get to the next one, to do the same amount of business that we did last year. And I wasn't comfortable with it. Some people can do that and then go home at the end of the day and say, well, I did what I had to do for my family, but for me, I couldn't do it. So after about 17 years of a lot of blood, sweat, and tears and a lot of hours, I walked away from the business. I just couldn't put my name on it any longer. Well, I guess I'm what you would call a financial geek. My wife is always teasing me that I always have a business book or magazine in my face, and she'll walk into the room and I'm eagerly watching C-SPAN 2 and there's a panel talking about cap and trade, and she'll look at the TV and shake her head and just walk out the door. I know this stuff is boring for most people, but I'm fascinated by it, and I'm fascinated by the interconnection and how what goes on in the rest of the world affects our daily lives and affects my clients' retirement and their children and grandchildren. So I figured, what better way to make a living than do something that I'm already fascinated with, and something that gives me the ability to make a profound effect on other people's lives in a positive way. I can't think of a better reason to get out of bed and go to work in the morning.